Hello and welcome into the Coach on the Couch podcast with your hosts, Martin Fleming and Stephen Alexander Simmons. This fortnightly podcast covers various topics relating to subjects from career and work, health, nutrition and well-being to parenting, relationships, and much more. Each episode will deal with a particular area of these. So, if you are interested in learning and hearing some different thoughts, ideas, and even get some tips or helpful suggestions on these areas of life, or perhaps you are into self-development, then we hope you will stay with us and hopefully enjoy a fun, insightful, and what we hope will be an interesting discussion for you.
Hello and welcome back to another episode. In this episode, we explore different aspects of loneliness and different viewpoints on what that might mean, how it can be not only a negative, but it can also, be considered a good thing as well. Being alone or loneliness and another, just various angles of perspectives on that whole kind of topic. So we hope you enjoy this episode and we'll get right into it. Been 2 weeks. It doesn't feel like 2 weeks though. since we did this last.
No, I mean time certainly does fly, isn't it? When you're having fun.
I don't know. It's learning loads of new editing tools has been the thing that's taken up my time. I think but it feels like. Wasn't that long. It wasn't 2 weeks anyway. It doesn't feel like 2 weeks since I did the last. So, I was thinking for this episode as it's kind of mental health awareness week, and the basic theme was kind of around loneliness, was kind of just aspects of kind of either being alone or loneliness really, such as kind of, is it always a bad thing for one thing, or and is loneliness always about kind of having to be with people, to not be lonely, to be with people and stuff like that. I don't know what you think about any of those.
I was thinking about this topic when you sent it to me, because I personally find this a very interesting one. I was walking along the beach, and it's something that I've started to do more and more now. And when I originally started doing this walk, there was this feeling that I felt quite alone at doing it. And obviously I was alone because I was by myself. But there was this real deep, dark sense of being loneliness. And sometimes the emotions associated around loneliness are like real sadness and almost depression. And I had to be very careful and mindful of my emotions, because as I was walking along the beach, it's a beautiful scene. You can almost imagine it, beautiful sand, soft, and then the gentle waves of the sea and the sun. And so everything about the environment was absolutely fantastic and beautiful. And so there was no reason for me to almost feel lonely and alone, because I was surrounded by all this beautiful nature, So in that moment, how could I possibly feel alone? And so there's that question around, is loneliness just about being around another human being, excuse me.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of the time people associate that if you're with people, you're not going to be lonely, and it's all about being with people, but sometimes you can be in a crowd and still feel alone.
I mean, how does it, I mean, for me, that that doesn't make sense, but it makes sense because that is so true. And if it's about being around people equals we're not going to feel lonely, then why is it then that we do feel lonely still when we're around people? Because surely if being around people was the answer, not the anecdote, that's the what's the word, antidote. Yeah, if being around people is the antidote to being lonely, then why is it that we can still feel lonely around people?
Well, yeah. So, and then also equally, kind of with or being alone, or there's also like when people say about taking time out and being mindful and taking time out for yourself and spending time alone and time for yourself. So it's like, well, if you're going to discourage it, then that's kind of counterproductive on that score, isn't it?
But is there a difference there? Because when you, to use your phrase, to take time out or whatever, that I would say that's intentional. There's that intentionality there. You're saying, look, I'm going to take myself away, or I'm going to spend time away. So I'm deliberately, intentionally taking myself away from people or away from a situation.
So then, do we pose the question whether loneliness is a choice?
I think that's a very good question, and I think it is very much a double-edged sword. And I almost want to give a politician's answer with this. You know how politicians never seem to answer questions, or they answer it with another question. And I think it's for me personally, that is a fantastic question, because is loneliness a choice? Because, for example, before we recorded, we were talking about social isolation. So if you're feeling isolated, so for example, if I'm feeling isolated and I have this moment of utter loneliness, perhaps I'm in my bedroom, for example. I don't know why I'd be feeling lonely in my bedroom, but I'd be feeling lonely in my bedroom. Let's not go there. But, and I'm saying to myself, I'm feeling a bit sad, I'm feeling a bit lonely. Then actually, what do? I will message somebody. Maybe there's somebody who I haven't messaged for ages, or maybe there's somebody who I haven't rang for ages. So then it's about me taking action and then saying, look, I'm feeling lonely this moment. I bet you somebody else might be. Or actually, if I speak to someone, I'm not going to feel lonely. So I counteract that by actually speaking to someone, and then actually, lo and behold, after the conversation, my environment hasn't changed. I'm still on my own, but I feel less lonely. So what's changed between those two spaces? The fact that I've had that small bit of interaction or that communication.
But I suppose that's, to some degree, that's dependent then on the degree of how much you want to change that situation, which is, I suppose, maybe a whole realm of another discussion. But
well, I mean, it's a very important question, because you might say to me, and I've heard this say to me, oh, Steve, well, that's okay for you because maybe you've got friends, or maybe you've got people you can just ring up or message, or people feel like they can ring you up or message you. So that's okay for you. But actually, I don't have those networks. I don't have those friendships. I don't have those relatives to go to. Now, I could counter-argue and say that, okay, well, that for me didn't happen overnight. I could say, I had to go out there, I had to make friends, I had to create networks. And so, again, it comes back to that taking responsibility and taking action. It didn't just happen. Do you know what I mean? So I could easily make excuses and say, oh, it's a shame for me, blah, blah, blah. But at some point, I had to take action and say, well, okay, I recognise this is a need that I need filling. So how do I fulfil that need? Okay, I need to do something about this.
What about if you get people who prefer to be on their own, though? They're not bothered by having friends or...
That, you know what, I love the fact that you've said that, because then if that's the case, and I respect that, because at times I love being on my own, but then the flip side of that is, if they love being on their own so much, then why is it that they can still at some point feel lonely and alone if they like their company so much?
Yeah, totally. I can't disagree with that. Not that I meant to disagree with everything, but I can do, though.
But I mean, I have to say, and I'll happily admit this, is actually people don't. It's amazing, isn't it? You know how you can look at someone or be around someone and you think, oh my gosh, they're the most outgoing, they're the most enigmatic. I'm trying to think of some of the big words to use to describe this sort of person, but you probably know what I'm talking about. You can be around these people and you think, oh my gosh, they are so outgoing. How can they even like being on their own? But for me personally, I love those times when I'm on my own, because it means that actually I get to do something for myself, or I get to charge up myself, because as much as I love being around people, I also find it very, very draining. It's kind of spiritually and energetically, if you want to kind of use those words, but I find it draining. So then, you know, hand on heart, I do like to be on my own sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, for me, I would count myself as a people person. So I like having people around, or I like seeing people, you know, and all that kind of interaction and stuff. And I'm quite outgoing, but how can I put it? For me, it's like the difference is, there'll be times where, if my son's with his mum and I'm I'm not doing anything else, whatever, I'm here on my own, and I've lived away from home for so many years anyway, from when I left school, that it actually doesn't bother me. I'm happy whatever environment, and I don't know what the difference is there. I mean, yes, it's still nice to have communication with other people, or contact, or be around people, but if I don't, then it also doesn't bother me either. I can get on and just do stuff or whatever. I think the main time that I've ever felt where I need that support and to be around people, I don't know whether I would really count it as loneliness, though. Maybe it would be, but it's like when you're going through emotional traumas of some kind, whether it's a relationship breakup or that kind of a thing, and you just feel you need support, and that would be a time when, for me, I would seek out other kind of company and stuff like that. But yeah, I don't know whether that's just it's a talking about choice, whether that became kind of, for me, it's acceptable because I've just decided that it is what it is, if that makes sense.
So something you became accustomed to, and so
yeah,
you kind of dealt with the situation as it was.
Yeah, and I just accept the situation as it is. So obviously my preference is, I like the whole social aspect of being around people and things like that, but at the same time, if I'm not, I think also, I think there is a part where, if you're around someone, if you're around people all the time, you don't, I think I would get to a point where I would need time by myself anyway. Then I understand the whole draining thing there. If you're always around people, I think it could get draining, but just on the average, the balance side of it, if I'm alone, then it doesn't worry me as such. But then I know, as I was saying, I know people that say, it doesn't bother them having friends or not having friends and this, that, and the other. But kind of then those sort of people then they at some stage or other they do say about kind of someone this person or that person doesn't want to know them or whatever, and it's if they chose to be that way, though, then is that not expected? I don't know.
It's an interesting one you mention about the whole kind of friends thing, and the reason I mention that is because, as you know, I go on TikTok a lot now. I made this big announcement the other day, and I basically said, look, I'm not here to make friends, I'm not here for this, I'm not here for that. And then suddenly, I'm not saying I got abused, because it wasn't quite abuse, but it was this sense of, oh my gosh, like, why wouldn't you want friends? And don't you class me as a friend? And then suddenly it was like, you must be an alien or something. It was so kind of countercultural to them. as if to say, well, you have to have friends, you need friends. If you're not on here for friends, then what are you on here for? And they just couldn't get their head around the fact that, yes, you know, it's nice to have friends, and if friends happen, yeah, all very well. But my intention right here on this app is literally just to showcase who I am about, what I have to offer, and more like that, rather than I'm here to make friends, I'm here to have a one night stand. Do you know what? And like the usual things that a lot of people are on that app for. Some people go on to be entertained, for example. But it was so alien and countercultural, the fact that I wasn't there for friends. They just couldn't get their head around that.
Is it not alien though? Because it's part of social media, so it's social.
That's a very interesting question, actually.
We digress.
No, we don't digress, because that's a very.
Would you say that social media plays a big part in either counteracting loneliness or even creating loneliness?
Oh, crikey. I mean, that's a great spanner in the works, but it's a very on point question, isn't it? And I think it's got to be both.
Yeah, I was going to say, because you've got one side where, just like, you know, they used to say about TV, you know, people are on it all the time. That is their social skills, their actual in-person social skills, and their, you know, and actually meeting people, is that now like decreased and degraded, and everything's all done online, or you know, and then you've got the other flip side, that can it connect people together and bring people together.
I was watching, speaking of TikTok, I was watching this video and I found it quite funny. And this guy said, and I'm going to like misquote here, but you kind of get the gist of it. He said, the TV broke the other day. I actually spoke to the wife. She was all right, actually. I might speak to her again. But it was this sense of, you know, like you said, because we spend so much time, I don't think so much now, well, not me personally, but, you know, we spend so much time looking at screens, whether it's TV, whether it's our phone, tablets, computers, that actually, and this is a question that I'm raising myself a lot more, is are we losing that skill to communicate now with each other?
Yeah, and properly interact.
Because
exactly. You've got all these emojis and all these other little images that people throw up and they don't say anything. So it's like, is that really interacting properly? It's, you know, you've lost all the intonation, all the, you know, even though it might come out in an image, it's like you're still losing some of that stuff.
And the whole, I mean, you mentioned like emojis and stuff, and that's a whole kind of language in itself. You've almost got to learn the language of emojis. So, for example, if you send me something and I like it, right, I can't just put a like now, because that says, oh, is that all? Right, I have to put a love. Now, I can't just put a love, because actually, well, you know, what does that actually mean? So now I have to put like a heart or something. But actually, I can't put a heart, because that might mean that I fancy you, or you know, I want to go on a date with you. And so the whole kind of emoji language is a whole language in itself. And if you get that wrong, you are opening yourself to abuse.
And it changes between platforms.
Do you want to say a bit more about that? Because I don't...
Well, just because I think the way you would, like when you're doing just, even if we're just looking at likes and stuff like that. So if you, everyone would be familiar with, in the main anyway, most people would be familiar with all the ones you can do on Facebook, or the reactions anyway, and that kind of thing. But if you're someone who's on LinkedIn, yes, you get likes and you get loves, but the other reactions are very, very different. So you'll get things like celebrate, insightful, various things like that.
Now, I'm glad you mentioned LinkedIn, because when it comes to LinkedIn, and I hope you don't mind me saying this, I personally would call you a LinkedIn expert, right? Not in the sense of you are a LinkedIn expert, but in the sense that you use it a lot more, you're a lot more familiar with that. And so my question to you is, do people use those, you know, you mentioned them about insightful, and I think there's there's a range, isn't there? Now, LinkedIn is not something I go on a lot, but you do. So do you want to say more about those? And do you think they are used well? Are they used as much as they can do? Do people engage with them? I mean, what's your feelings amongst
They
that?
are they're used in a lot more different way, because it's a more, it's a network for more to do with professionals and professional networking. So when articles are posted, someone will like those, but or that I've seen on occasion, if I've checked what the reactions are and stuff. I've seen people use things like insightful before and that kind of thing, but they're not. It's not done. I don't think it's done in the same scale as somewhere like Facebook and whatever. But then see, Facebook's a different platform entirely as well. Um, so yeah, but yes, it's going back to the whole alone or loneliness thing. I think social media it can be a cause, and I think it could be. I mean, it can be used to bring people closer together, and to have that communication. But I think we just have to, from a social media point of view, I think it has to be, used carefully, that it's not keeping people apart as well, just because of the convenience.
I'll tell you what I find fascinating, and I absolutely do find this fascinating, like genuinely, is, I mean, I'll speak a lot about TikTok because I love TikTok, but with there, it's almost like this competition to get followers. Now, I speak to a lot of people who have a lot of followers, but the biggest criticism I get, and they say to me, is, actually, I've got lots of followers, but they don't want to engage with me, or they don't engage. And I kind of get confused by that, because I'm saying, well, hold on a minute, your intention is to get followers, you've got the followers, but now you're saying, well, that's not enough. Now what you're saying is you want the engagement, so you want the engagement and the followers. And if they don't get the engagement, we talk about loneliness and stuff like that, and it's like,
that's it. Almost,
I don't feel.
Yeah, that's almost as if they're presenting that they don't feel accepted, or they feel alone because they're not getting engagement.
Yeah, I know, and it's crazy, isn't it? Because you think, again, because the intention is to get followers, and they've got the followers, so they've got that need, ticked, if you like. Tick, lots of followers, fantastic. But actually, nobody's engaging with me. So I think is there something to be said again? We come back to communication, and maybe communication is the key to not feeling lonely.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because a lot of people say to me, and I get this message a lot actually, and I feel bad for this because I feel like maybe I don't do this enough. But one of the criticisms I get, not criticisms as such, is I miss our chats. And I do like a good chat. Give me a messenger chat. I love a good chat. But if I'm doing that to, I don't know, 15 people, 20 people, as well as my responsibilities, as well as looking after the kids, as well as, do you know what I mean? I mean, the list continues. It's I can't keep that up. You know what I mean? That's not sustainable. But what that says to me is, again, there's something to be said about people's need to chat.
Oh yeah.
Not about anything in particular.
But to have that contact again, it's to have that interaction, that contact, isn't it?
And sometimes I struggle to just chat for the sake of chat's sake. Do you know what I mean? Say, for example, if I go shopping, right? Say I'm going for bread, that's it. Job done. Tick. Job done. And the same with when people want to chat with me, I'm like, well, what do you want? What's your intention here?
Want to chat about?
Right? And people find that cold, they find it a little bit, standoffish. I'm not, because my time is valuable. Do you know what I mean? So I want to know, well, what is it that you want? Do you want my advice? Do you want to hang out? Do you want, do you want to vent? And it's about me saying, well, I need to know what it is I can offer you. Because if it's just a chat, in inverted brackets, I don't really have time for that. Do you know what I mean? And that sounds really bad to say, and I do feel bad for saying that, but sometimes I've got better things to do than just chat for the sake of it, unless it's an arranged time. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that's not convenient for people, though.
I mean, yeah, I don't know. I don't. I don't know how to respond to that one. Only because, like, I know in terms of, um, so from messengers and messenger point, excuse me, point of view and social media types of things. When if people message me, if I haven't got the time, I just don't respond until I have the time to respond. So.
But do you?
I don't.
But do you actually tell them that?
I don't always struggle with that.
Do you tell them that? Do you say, look, I don't currently have time, or I will get back to you later? So you just leave them hanging.
Well, yeah, because if they're just
you just leave them hanging. I'm like, okay.
This is going to be public domain, so yeah. Yeah. If someone messages me, I mean, for example, I mean, same as a call, if I can't take a call, I'll decline it. So, I mean, because if I'm in the middle of something else or doing other stuff and I can't, because if I could take the call or I can message back, then at the same time I'm saying, well, I have the time to do that. So if I don't have the time to do it, then I why am I answering?
You see, the reason I ask again, it wasn't to be personal too, because I know that lots of people do that, and what I like about talking to you about it is I think we are almost opposite ends of the spectrum. And I think there's good and bad points about that, because what is it that we're communicating to others when we do that? So, for example, if I'm always available, what is it that I'm communicating with people? I'm communicating that I'm always available. So when I don't feel... Exactly. So when there are times when actually I just want to be left alone, thank you very much, it confuses them, because it's like, hold on a minute, this guy is always available, he's always accepting. Why does he want time on his own? I don't get it. Do you know what I mean? Whereas I'd like to be a little bit more, well, actually, put that boundary up a little bit more and say, well, I don't have time, or just not answer it. But I can't do it. Honestly, I can't do it. It's like an urge. I don't know. If someone like pings me, I'm like, I've got to answer them back. I've got to do it right now. So if I don't do it right now, then I might never do it, and then blah blah blah. And do you know what I mean?
I do, but I don't, because I don't have that issue. So. But I mean, in terms of the theme of the thing, the only thing that, with how I approach it, the only thing I'd have to be careful of is which I do always look at messages or things coming in. It's just if I don't have the time to actually get into a whole stream of conversation, but if I don't answer someone until a long time after, is the fact that, obviously depending on what that person wanted to communicate with me for. So yeah, if someone's like going through something tough and they're feeling a bit lonely, disconnected and all that kind of stuff, then obviously it's probably not, I probably wasn't the best person for them to contact if I was busy. So, I mean, with phone calls, what I always say to people is to message me first.
I do that.
To let me know.
Oh my gosh, I do that as well.
Because just in case I'm busy, because there's no point in phoning if I can't speak to them and stuff like that. So I always tend to say to people, well, before you phone, just message and just let me know, just in case I can't talk to you or whatever. So I do, it's a bit of a mix really for me, but just depends on how kind of caught up in stuff I am in. So, but at the same time, yeah, I wouldn't feel very good with myself if someone, was going through a very emotional thing and needed emotional support or whatever, and I wasn't there for them. So
I mean, okay, so if somebody came up to you and said, like, as a coach or maybe as a friend even, right, and said to you, Martin, I'm feeling lonely, what kind of advice or guidance would you give them?
Well, the fact that that's very generic is hard to say, because I think I'd want to have a discussion with them about, or whether I know the background to everything first or not, I don't know, but because just seeking out other people is not necessarily always going to be the answer, or it might, or even in terms of seeking out other people, it might be seeking out other support groups or whatever, that kind of stuff. So it depends on what the reason why they're feeling lonely. If it's, as a friend, and if it's purely just like they're lonely because they're bored, because they've got nothing else to do, and like their friends are doing other stuff or whatever, that kind of a thing, then it's like, well, I would kind of explore kind of what other interests or what other things do they have, and that they could be doing, rather than kind of just being bored. And like, to be lonely because you're bored, to me that poses the question whether that's, again, we're back to choice. It kind of almost speaks to me that person's kind of, because they're just bored, they've given up on bothering, if you know what I mean. So it's a question, well, they could do something about it in that situation. So other than that, yeah, I mean, it really depends on the background to the loneliness and what the deeper issues are. So
I think, I'm glad that you actually brought up this kind of topic as well, because I think, respectfully, I don't think it's something that you can cover in a 20-minute, 40-minute podcasting. I think it is one of those ongoing discussions, I think, because I think there's so many deep-rooted stuff going on there, and I think there's so many strands you could go down and rabbit warrens and stuff like that in this topic, because like you said, you've established some of the things. Are you lonely because you're bored? Are you lonely because you're on your own? Are you lonely because it's a choice? Are you lonely because actually you're in a bad place? And do you know what I mean? There's so many things within that. I mean, Mother Teresa said that actually loneliness was the biggest disease in the world. So she recognised that loneliness isn't a great thing. But then, like you said, sometimes actually we choose to be on our own, and
it can be a good thing.
And they're actually, you look at in the health services and stuff like that, and they're actually promoting it in the health industry, should I say. They're actually promoting that, self-care. The word self kind of gives a clue there. Do you know what I mean?
Mindfulness and self-care. And
exactly. So they're saying, well, times of being alone or being by yourself is actually therapeutic. And I love retreats. I absolutely love retreats. And the whole idea of retreats, I mean, you can go away with other people, is that it's about taking that time out by yourself, or, just getting away from the world. And so there is this push, if you like, that says, actually, this is therapeutic to be by yourself, to have this self-care, to be alone. So, but the reason I don't like it sometimes is because it means I've got to be alone with my thoughts. So it's not a case of, I don't like being on my own. It's a case of sometimes I don't like being alone with my thoughts. And I think that is a struggle for a lot of people.
Is that because you don't like yourself, then?
This is what I'm saying.
That's a whole another
it opens
discussion.
up so much, and I think and exactly, and I think you hit the nail on the head there, and about that sense of, so what is it about not being alone with your thoughts that people don't like? And I think at that point, I think that's a whole different topic, isn't it?
It is. The other thing that came to mind there was also, what about, in terms of, if loneliness was that bad, what about the people who choose to go off and live off the land and completely off grid and in the wilderness or whatever? Not that there's many of them, but people go and do it, and they don't have it, rarely any interaction with anyone. But they're happy enough. Well, we can only assume they're happy enough.
I mean, there's been a trend recently about people coming off Facebook for almost that reason. It's almost like they've just found it so overwhelming, and so, this isn't what I'm about as a person. So they've actually taken the stance of coming off Facebook because of those reasons, because it's their way of saying, look, you know, I'm escaping from the rat race, so to speak. But yeah, I mean, you're right, there are people who do that, and I've got to say, for me personally, it's tempting. It is tempting. I don't know if I'd be able to do that for a long period, but for a week, maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and my own company would be doing my head in, I think.
Mm-hmm. If you're living off the land, you'll have to go hunting as well.
Sounds too much like hard work to me, to be honest.
You have to catch your own chicken.
Again, too much like hard work.
Yeah, no cookies and cake. Well, not unless you make them with yourself, but you'll have to grow your own corn.
So I'd have to like set up my own Tesco's, but I'd just be there by myself, so that'd be a little bit boring.
But would it be boring if you're accepting of yourself and were happy within your own company? And if you chose to do
full
it,
circle, don't we?
Yeah, exactly. See, so it's I think I think there's obviously it can be a negative, I think, but I think it's not fair for it to be just branded as a negative thing, being lonely. And I think when we were saying about the whole self-care thing and all that, like many other things, I think loneliness in a constructive form, and I think, you know, loneliness or being alone at times and everything, as they say, in moderation and in balance is a good thing. I think if you have more, you have too much of either way, I think it you know, again, like many things, it can be something that's not very good. So if you have too much of it and you feel disconnected, that can put you into spirals of despair or whatever. And if you don't have enough of it and you're around people all the time and occupied all the time, you have no time for yourself and all that self-care and mindfulness. So I think it's that whole balance again. So but there we go. Yes. You were, earlier on you said about, and when you were talking about your TikTok thing, I'm going to put you on the spot now because I haven't told you about this. Okay. Just for listeners' purposes, a few little updates on podcast stuff. You were saying about kind of essentially putting yourself out there, letting people know kind of more about you or whatever, and profiling you. So as a kind of a mini series bonus episodes, I was planning to do a few episodes around kind of the choice of why we chose to do the podcast, or if in terms of my bonus episode on that, my take on why that was and what I wanted from it, who I am, and a bit more about me as my own kind of coaching and what I offer and various things like that, just to give people more background. And I was hoping and wondering whether you'll do an episode for that about yourself.
I think both of those would kind of add value, really.
So there's the two individual ones, and I've got a few others, like just on the actual pod, you know, kind of reasons for the podcast and all the other stuff. But that's my plan. That's something that's gonna probably be done in another while once I've got very familiar with all the editing and other software that I'm having to get to grips with. And shortly, if not on this episode, which I'm hoping is going to be on this episode, but if not, very shortly we'll have some proper intros and outros as well to the podcast. So yes, that's all. What's the up and coming developments?
I just want to say thank you for this session, Martin. And the reason I want to say thank you is because
you had biscuits.
I have had biscuits. It's true. I haven't opened them yet.
That's why. And coffee.
They are bonuses, but you have actually given me you know, sometimes you think you have life sorted, or you think, oh, you've got your answers to this, like not almost ready-made answers, but you kind of come to a place where, again, we talk about acceptance. But for me, this has actually kind of given me some food for thought, and actually kind of allowed me to kind of question the idea of around loneliness, you know, about it being choice, and about what that means for me. So I want to thank you, actually, because like I said, you give me food for thought, and I think I'm going to personally take away a lot from this session anyway, and I'll probably be doing some reflection on it. So yeah, it's been good.
Yeah, it has. I mean, I hope that other people can take enough away from it as well, equally, and that it's given maybe a few different perspectives on it than just what might be in the mainstream, and how, you know, typically there's the promotion of kind of if you're lonely, kind of getting people together or that kind of thing, or and support services where that's kind of bringing people together. And as I say, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but I think it, you know, I hope and feel that, you know, maybe we've just covered a few different perspectives. So we'll be back shortly in another couple of weeks, hopefully. Thank you for joining us today. In this episode, we covered many different aspects around loneliness. You know, is it a good thing or a bad thing? And what is loneliness all about? Is it a choice? Various things like that. Some of these are kind of alternative types of views, but not to take away from people who might be, you know, feeling very lonely, disconnected, and in maybe a dark place at the moment. If that's the case, then there is, you know, obviously many services out there and supports out there to help, and, you know, we would definitely, you know, encourage you to go and seek those supports and services and help to combat your loneliness and help you out of the, you know, place that you're in at the moment. But we just wanted to give an alternative type of view and perspective on loneliness, which kind of some people might just find insightful and refreshing. So that was the kind of episode this time, and we'll have another one coming to you in 2 weeks, and we hope you enjoyed this episode, and we look forward to being with you very soon.
Thank you for listening to the fortnightly Coach on the Couch podcast with your hosts, Martin Fleming and Stephen Alexander Simmons. You can find this podcast on the following platforms: Spotify, Anchor, and Google Podcasts, and more platforms to follow. You can leave comments and feedback directly on the Anchor platform, or you can contact us directly by emailing us at coachonthecouch22@gmail.com. Thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to being with you soon.